At 71, I thought I understood disappointment. I had buried a husband, outlived a sister, and learned to carry grief quietly the way women of my generation do. Pressed flat, tucked away, never shown to anyone unless asked. But I had never imagined standing alone in a side parking lot in my good blue dress, listening through a cracked window to the sound of my son giving a toast inside his brand new restaurant, thanking everyone who had made it possible, and not saying my name once. Let me back up. My son had been planning the restaurant for 3 years. It started the way his big ideas always did. A phone call late on a Sunday night, his voice bright with the particular energy that only arrives when he wants something. "Mom, I think I've finally found it. The thing I'm supposed to do." He talked for 40 minutes about the space on Carver Street, the exposed brick, the wood-fired oven, the concept. Italian-American, neighborhood feel. A place people would come back to. I listened. I always listened. When he asked if I could help with the startup costs, I didn't ask how much first. I asked what he needed. The number, when he finally said it, sat in the air between us for a moment. $42,000. More than I had planned to part with at this point in my life. 2 years past retirement, living on a teacher's pension, and the modest savings my husband had left behind. But I thought about my son at 11. Standing in my kitchen trying to make pancakes for the first time and burning every single one with such focused seriousness that I didn't have the heart to correct him. I thought about who he could be if someone believed in him. I wired the money in 2 transfers over 3 days. He called me from the title office when the papers were signed. His daughter, my granddaughter Jules, sent me a voice message that same evening. She was 14 then. Gap-toothed grin audible through the phone, saying, "Grandma, Dad says you're the reason this is happening. You're basically a founding partner." I saved that voice message. I listened to it more than once in the months that followed, while the restaurant was being built and the calls from my son grew shorter and less frequent, and while my daughter-in-law began responding to my texts with thumbs-up emojis instead of words. The grand opening was on a Saturday in October. I pressed my blue dress the night before. It was the one I'd bought for my youngest nephew's college graduation. A good dress, not flashy, but serious. The kind of dress that says I showed up, and I mean it. I brought a card with a handwritten note inside, and a small framed print I'd found at an antique market. A vintage Italian street scene, warm-lit and quiet, the kind of image that belongs on the wall of a place that wants to feel like home. My daughter-in-law called that morning. Her voice was pleasant in the way voices are when someone has rehearsed what they're going to say. "We're so slammed with last-minute things," she told me. "Would you mind coming a little early? Like 2 o'clock? That way you can settle in before the actual guests arrive at 5. We'll put you at the back table near the kitchen. It's quieter, you can relax. We want you to be comfortable." I said that sounded fine. I even told her thank you. I arrived at 2. The restaurant smelled of fresh paint and garlic and something sweet I couldn't name. My daughter-in-law met me at the side door. Not the front, the side, and walked me past the kitchen to a small table near the storage hallway. There was a water glass and a bread basket already set out. She said they were just finishing the centerpieces and someone would check on me soon. She said it fast, the way you explain something to a child you're leaving with a sitter for the first time. Then she went back toward the main room, and the door swung shut behind her. I sat at that table for 2 hours. People passed through, kitchen staff I didn't know, a florist carrying armloads of eucalyptus, a young man adjusting speakers. None of them looked at me directly. I was furniture. I was part of the room. After the first hour, I stopped waiting for someone to come get me and started listening to what I could hear through the swing door. The rising noise of guests arriving, glass on glass, laughter becoming its own weather system. My son's voice, the particular timbre of it when he's performing confidence for a crowd. I recognized it from Little League games and school presentations and every job interview story he'd ever told me. At some point, I needed to find the restroom. I pushed through the swing door into the main hall and saw everything. String lights, packed tables, a slideshow on the back wall cycling through photographs of my son and daughter-in-law. The construction process, the first meal cooked in the new kitchen, faces I didn't know raising glasses to faces I didn't know, and my son at the center of it all, taller somehow, lit from within the way people are when everything is going exactly as they planned. He didn't see me. I found the restroom. On my way back, I stopped near the hallway entrance and listened to him speak. "This place," he said, "exists because of the people in this room, because of Catherine's parents who believed in us from day one, because of our friends who showed up to paint walls and taste test recipes at midnight, because of everyone who told us to go for it." He paused, and I actually thought, here it comes. And most of all, because of my wife, who is the most extraordinary person I have ever known. The room applauded. I walked back through the swing door and sat down at the small table near the storage hallway and did not cry. Not then. I set my card and my framed print on the table beside the untouched bread basket, and I sat there for another 20 minutes, very still, watching the fluorescent light above the refrigerator hum. Then I picked up my purse, left the card and the print on the table, and drove myself home. It was a 40-minute drive. I did not turn on the radio. My son texted at 11 that night. "Great opening. Hope you had fun. Sorry things were so crazy. Catherine said you left early. All good?" I put the phone face down on the nightstand. The next morning, I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table and did what I always do when something is wrong, but I can't yet name it. I looked at it directly. Not from the side, not through the soft gauze of maybe I misunderstood, or maybe it wasn't intentional. I looked at what had actually happened. I had been seated in a hallway. The guests had been seated in the dining room. My son had thanked his in-laws by name. He had thanked his friends. He had not mentioned me. He had not come to find me at any point during the evening. He had texted at 11 to say all good. I opened Instagram for the first time in months. My daughter-in-law had posted a reel. 30 seconds of the opening, golden lit, beautiful. The caption read, "Our dream, finally real. Couldn't have done it without our people." In the reel, there was footage of my son and daughter-in-law cutting a ceremonial ribbon. Her parents stood beside them. Friends I'd seen in photos over the years stood beside them. I was not in a single frame. I watched the reel 3 times. Then I put the phone down and went to the spare bedroom where I keep my filing cabinet. I am a woman who taught middle school English for 33 years, and I have never once in my adult life been disorganized about paperwork. The folder I needed was in the second drawer, clearly labeled, the way I label everything. Inside were 2 wire transfer confirmations, a co-signed equipment lease, a business insurance policy where I was listed as a secondary policyholder because my son had said it would lower his premium, a handwritten note from my son dated 14 months ago. "Mom, thank you doesn't cover it. You'll always be part of this. I mean that." I read the note twice. Then I set it back in the folder and sat down on the edge of the bed and thought about what I had actually given and what I had actually received. $42,000. 3 years of answered phone calls and encouraged doubt and talked down anxiety. 2 Thanksgivings spent at my son and daughter-in-law's house where I sat at the end of the table and helped Jules with her math homework while the adults talked in the kitchen. 1 birthday where my son called 2 days late and said sorry. Things have been insane. And a table near the storage hallway at a party I helped make possible. I went back to the kitchen and wrote a list, not of grievances. I've never been a woman who tallies grievances, but of facts, just the facts, the way I used to teach my students to write. What happened, when, what was said, what was not said. I filled 2 pages before I stopped. Then I made a second cup of coffee and I called my bank. The woman at the branch was young and efficient and kind in the careful way people are kind to older women they're slightly uncertain about. I asked to see a summary of all outgoing automatic transfers and any accounts connected to my name through co-signature or secondary authorization. She pulled the record. She printed them out without expression, the way professionals do when they've seen everything. There were 6 pages. The business insurance, paid monthly from my checking account. The equipment lease, still carrying my name as cosigner. 18 months of payments remaining. A quarterly transfer I had set up during the difficult early months. Startup support, restaurant. I had forgotten it was still running. It was not a small number. I also found, on page 4, a charge I didn't recognize at first. A monthly subscription to a restaurant management software. My son had asked if he could run it through my card just for a month while the business account got sorted out. That had been 8 months ago. I sat in that little consultation room for a long time with those 6 pages in my hands. I was not angry in the loud way. I was something quieter and more permanent than angry. I thought of the word used, and then I thought, no, that's not quite it either. You can be used and still be seen. What I understood finally, was invisible. I had been made into a utility, a resource, something that funds things and signs things and answers the phone, but does not get thanked by name in a room full of people, and does not get seated with the family, and does not get mentioned once in 30 seconds of golden lit footage. I looked up at the young woman across the table. I'd like to cancel the automatic transfers, I said. All of them, except my donation to the school literacy program, and I need to remove my name from the equipment lease. Can you start that process with me today? She hesitated. Some of these will require notification of the other parties, she said carefully, especially the co-signature. That's fine, I said. Notify them. I walked out into October sunshine, holding my copies, and stood on the sidewalk for a moment. I had expected to feel afraid. I had spent years in quiet terror of my son pulling further away. If I ever said the wrong thing, asked for too much, needed something he didn't want to give. That fear had been so constant I'd stopped noticing it, the way you stop noticing the sound of a refrigerator until it finally turns off. It had turned off. My attorney is a woman I've known for 20 years. She handled my husband's estate, and she is the kind of person who says exactly what she means without padding it. When I called and told her I needed to update my will and review the property deed, she said, "Come Thursday, 2 o'clock, I'll have coffee ready." I told her what had happened. Not all of it. I'm not someone who needs to tell all of it. Just enough. She listened without interrupting, which is rarer than it should be. "Are you removing your son entirely?" she asked. I looked out her window at the maple on the street. It had just started to turn, one branch at a time. "I haven't decided about my son," I said. "I've decided about Jules." She understood immediately. She poured more coffee, and we spent an hour drafting a trust. Jules would have access at 18, for education, for whatever beginning she needed. She was 14 now, which meant 4 years. Enough time for the money to grow a little, and enough time for Jules to grow into someone who could use it well. I believed she would. Jules is the kind of person who asks questions because she genuinely wants the answers, not because she's performing curiosity. She remembered my birthday every year without being reminded. She once called me on a random Tuesday afternoon, just to tell me about a book she'd finished that she thought I'd like. She is the only person in my son's family who has ever treated me like I was worth something other than my usefulness. I signed the documents. My attorney walked me to the door and said, "You know, people wait too long to do this." I said, "I know." I was one of them. My son called 3 days after the bank sent the notification letters. I let it go to voicemail. He left a message that was calm on the surface and confused underneath, the voice of someone who has rehearsed composure. He said there must be some kind of error. He said the lease payments had stopped, and the insurance had flagged, and could I please call him back? I called him back the next morning. I had made toast, and I ate it slowly while the phone rang. "Mom, what's going on?" he said. "No hello?" "I've been thinking," I said, "about the restaurant opening." A pause. "What about it?" I was seated in the hallway near the kitchen. "For 2 hours," I said. "I heard your toast through the swing door. You thanked your in-laws, you thanked your friends. You didn't mention me." Another pause longer. "Mom, things were so hectic, I'm sorry. I meant to come get you." "You didn't come get me." My voice was even. I was surprised by how even it was. "You didn't check on me once. And then, you posted 30 seconds of that night online, and I wasn't in any of it. And the caption said, 'Our people,' and I watched it 3 times trying to find myself, and I wasn't there. After $42,000 and 3 years of answering your calls at 11 at night. I wasn't there." Silence. "I didn't think." "No," I said, "you didn't." He started to say something about Catherine, about how she had handled the seating, about how these things were complicated. I let him talk. When he finished, I said, "I'm not interested in who planned what. I'm interested in what happened. And what happened is that you let it happen. And you texted at 11 that night to say all good. like I was a neighbor who dropped off a casserole. Mom. His voice had shifted. Something in it had cracked slightly, and I recognized the sound. I had heard it when he was 7 years old and had broken the neighbor's fence with a baseball and had to walk up the driveway to apologize. I didn't mean for it to be like that. I know you didn't, I said. But it was. I paused. The transfers have stopped. The co-signature on the lease is being removed. I wanted you to hear that from me. Mom, that's going to. I know, I said. I'm sorry for the inconvenience. I wasn't sorry, but I said it the way you say things when you want to close a door gently rather than slam it. When you're ready to talk about the rest of it. Not the money, the other part. You know where I am. I hung up and washed my coffee cup and stood at the kitchen window for a while, watching the sparrows on the feeder in the yard. My husband had built that feeder. 20 years ago, a Saturday afternoon, a bag of sunflower seeds and 2 hours of patient assembly. The sparrows had no idea who built it. They came every morning and ate without thinking about it. I had been the feeder for a long time. I was done with that now. Thelma showed up on a Wednesday with a foil-covered dish and no warning, the way she has been showing up since 1987. She set the dish on my counter, some kind of shepherd's pie, still warm, and stood back with her arms crossed and looked at me the way she always has, like I am a patient she's evaluating. Word travels, she said. Word always travels, I said. Sit down. She sat. I made tea. I told her what had happened, the whole version this time, because Thelma has known me long enough that I don't have to curate myself around her. She listened without trying to soften anything, which is why I've kept her for 40 years. You paid for that restaurant, she said finally. Mostly, I said. And he thanked his in-laws. By name. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, You know what I think happened? I think he married a woman who decided what kind of mother-in-law she wanted, and he let her decide. And over time, that became the shape of things. Not one big decision, just 100 small ones where he chose quiet over right, because quiet was easier. I turned my cup in my hands. I kept thinking if I was useful enough, it would become something warmer. It doesn't work that way, she said. You know it doesn't work that way. I do now. She stayed for 2 hours. We ate the shepherd's pie. She told me about her daughter's new house in Portland, and I told her about the bird feeder, and we talked about our old colleague Ruth, who had retired and moved to Tucson and was apparently doing extraordinary things with her garden. It was the most ordinary afternoon I had spent in months, and I was grateful for every minute of it. At the door, she hugged me tight. The kind of hug that means something. You were never the problem, she said into my shoulder. I'm starting to remember that, I said. Jules called on a Sunday. Not a text, an actual phone call, the way she sometimes does, which I love about her. Grandma, she said, Dad told me some stuff happened. Are you okay? I'm okay, I said. Are you? Yeah, I don't really understand all of it. But I wanted to check on you. A pause. And also I wanted to tell you I finished that Willa Cather book you gave me last Christmas. It took me this long because I kept stopping to reread parts. I sat down in the chair by the window. Which parts? She told me. We talked about the book for 20 minutes. Then she asked if she could come visit. Soon, maybe help me plant the spring bulbs. I'd mentioned wanting to do tulips along the front walk. I said yes. I said she could come whenever she wanted. I told her I'd bought brownie mix at the store, the good kind, and I was waiting for the right occasion. That's the occasion, she said. She came the following Saturday. She rang the bell, and when I opened the door, she was standing there with her backpack and a slightly embarrassed smile and a potted plant she'd brought from the garden center. A small rosemary bush, because she remembered I'd said I wanted to grow herbs. I wasn't sure what to bring, she said. This is exactly right, I said, and stepped back to let her in. We planted bulbs in the front yard. She wore my old gardening gloves, too big for her, and complained about the clay soil and asked me questions about my teaching years. The ones she always asks, what was the most surprising thing a student ever wrote? What was the hardest class I ever taught? Did I ever want to do something else? I answered honestly, all of it, because Jules has always made me feel like my answers matter. Not because she's performing interest, because she actually has it. We made brownies. We played 2 rounds of an old card game I found in the hall closet. She beat me both times and was gracious about it in a way that made me think she'd learned that from someone, and I wanted to believe some of it had come from me. That evening, before she left, she sat across from me at the kitchen table and said, "I know Dad messed up. I don't totally know how bad, but I know it was bad." She looked at her hands. "He's not a bad person. I just think he got turned around about what's important." "I think that's right," I said. "I don't want to be like that," she said. "I think about it sometimes. How people just stop seeing each other." I reached across the table and put my hand over hers. "The fact that you think about it means you won't be." She didn't say anything, but she turned her hand over and held mine. My son came 6 weeks later. He didn't call first. He knocked on the front door on a Tuesday evening, and when I opened it, he looked like he hadn't been sleeping well. He'd lost some of the openness in his face, that ease he'd always had. And in its place was something more careful and uncertain, which was, I thought, a better place for him to be standing. "Can I come in?" he asked. "For a little while," I said. He sat at the kitchen table. I made tea I didn't offer him and sat across from him and waited. "I've been thinking," he said, "about the opening. About a lot of things, actually." He looked at the table surface. "Catherine said she told you to come early because it would be calmer. That was her idea. And I didn't push back on any of it. I didn't think about what it would look like from where you were sitting." He exhaled. "That was wrong. I know it was wrong." "Where was I sitting?" I asked. He looked up. "I want you to say it," I said. "Not for me, for you." He sat with that for a moment. "You were in a hallway, while everyone who had never given you a dime was in the dining room." His jaw tightened, and I thanked Catherine's parents in front of everyone, and I didn't say your name. "You didn't say my name," I confirmed. "No." He shook his head slowly. "I didn't." The kitchen was very quiet. I could hear the refrigerator and the last of October wind against the window. "I'm not going to pretend that the financial stuff doesn't matter to us right now," he said. "It does. We're managing, but it's harder, and I know I don't have the right to ask you to change that." He paused. "I'm not here to ask you to change that. I'm here because Jules told me you talked." And I started thinking about what it would mean if this was just how things were. If I just let this be how things ended up. "What do you want it to look like instead?" I said. He didn't have a quick answer, which was the right response. "I want you to be at the table," he said finally. "Not the hallway table, the family table." He met my eyes. "I have to make that happen, I know. That's not something you can do for me." "No," I said, "it isn't." I stood up and walked to the window. The rosemary bush Jules had brought was on the sill, doing well in the thin October light. I looked at it for a moment. "You can come to dinner," I said, "on the 3rd Sunday of the month. We'll see how that goes." I turned around. "One Sunday at a time. No performance, no pretending. If you say you're coming, you come. If something changes, you call me yourself. Not Catherine, not a text emoji, you call me." He nodded. "And if that goes well for a few months," I said, "we can talk about the rest." He stood. He looked like he wanted to hug me and wasn't sure he'd earned it yet. I appreciated that uncertainty. It meant he was paying attention. "Thank you, Mom," he said. "Don't thank me yet," I said. "Show up." The first Sunday dinner was quiet and a little formal, the way first things often are. But he came. He helped clear the table without being asked. He told me about a new dish on the menu, a roasted tomato soup, and described it carefully, the way he used to describe things when he was 12 and had just discovered something he loved. I listened the way I always have. Jules started coming twice a month. She brought books and questions, and that easy, unperformed affection that I had once thought I would lose. I had not lost it. It had been waiting. The rosemary on the windowsill grew. The tulip bulbs went in the ground in late October, and all winter I walked past that front bed, knowing that something was happening under the surface, slow and invisible and certain. In January, I started a small writing group at the library. 4 women, Thursday mornings, 2 hours, coffee and honest pages. It had been an idea I'd carried for years and never acted on, one of those things that waits in the quiet places of your life while you spend your energy propping up everyone else's plans. I posted a small notice on the library bulletin board and had more responses than I expected. At the first meeting, the woman beside me asked what kind of writing I did myself. I thought about it. Memoir, I said. I'm learning to write about my own life as if it matters. She smiled. That's the hardest kind. Yes, I said it is. But I am learning. One Thursday at a time. One honest page, one Sunday dinner, one rosemary plant, one afternoon with a 14-year-old who reads Willa Cather and holds her grandmother's hand across the kitchen table without being asked. That spring, the tulips came up red along the front walk, every single one. I stood at the window in my kitchen the morning I noticed them and just looked for a while, coffee warm in both hands. My neighbor called from across the street. Your yard looks beautiful, she said. It does, I called back. I meant it. I wasn't performing gratitude or making conversation. I just meant it, the way you mean things when you have finally stopped waiting for someone else to tell you what you're allowed to feel. I am 71 years old. I live alone in a house that smells like rosemary and old books and whatever I have decided to cook that day. My son comes on the third Sunday of the month. My granddaughter comes when she can and calls when she can't. My friend Thelma shows up with food and no warning and stays exactly as long as I need her to. I paid for this life with more than money. I paid for it with years of making myself smaller so others could feel bigger, of swallowing questions so no one would call me difficult, of waiting in hallways while the party went on without me. I am not waiting anymore. And if you are somewhere right now, sitting in a back room listening to the party through a door, I want you to hear this. The people who love you will come to find you. If they don't come to find you, that is also your answer. And your answer is worth listening to. Stand up, walk out, go home and make tea and look at yourself in the mirror until you remember who you were before you started making yourself invisible for someone else's comfort. You built something. Don't let anyone else take your name off the door.